All right, it looks like we have all of our attendees with us now. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. We will be speaking with our esteemed panel about agile mining supply chains in challenging times and what challenging times we're in right now. I hope everyone is safe and everyone's loved ones and family are keeping safe as well. And hopefully we will at one point get out of this and see the end, the light at the end of the tunnel. So this is a joint event between Schulich Executive Education Center and Mine Africa. And before we get much further into this webinar, I thought I'd turn it over to Wayne Floriani, who's the Vice President of Mine Africa, to share some thoughts with us on our new partnership between SEEK and Mine Africa. Wayne?
Great, thanks Claudia, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We're absolutely thrilled. We've signed a new partnership with Schulich School at York University, and we're delighted to announce that this is the first event that we're doing in the program, and I think the real beneficiaries from this are going to be the global mining industry, who will benefit from Schulich's track record and global reputation, as well as our experience in doing training and global seminars under our Mine Africa, Mine Latin America, and Master Mining brands. I think the timing in the current situation is very appropriate. We're looking forward to bringing great value added content to the markets. This is the first in a series of online webinars that we're going to be running. We'll be also offering paid programming and custom programming to specific clients in both English and French, and eventually Spanish. And you can see full details on our partnership with Schulich Executive Education Center and the current course offerings that we have at our news section on our website at mineafrica.com. So again, thank you for joining us today, and back to you, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Yeah, on behalf of the Schulich Executive Education Center, I can only agree, and we're very excited about this new partnership and where this will lead us in the journey we're embarking on. My name is Claudia Mueller. I am the Program Director of the Mining Academy at the Schulich Executive Education Center. So my Center of Excellence, that is called the Mining Academy, focuses on education for professionals around mining. And this is why we partner with Mine Africa, because our objectives are very aligned. So with that in mind, I thought before we get started with our panel discussion and I introduce our panelists, I will do a quick introduction. And as part of that introduction, I wanted to let our participants know how they can ask questions. You will notice that you have been muted and your video has been disabled upon entry of the webinar. And if you want to ask questions, you will see that there's a Q&A function usually at the bottom of your screen. It does say Q&A, and if you have any questions, feel free to type your question in there. You will also see that you have the ability to vote on questions that have already been asked. So if you see that your question has already been asked by someone else, vote on it and it will bring it up through the lines of questions. And I will be able to see that a lot of people share that same question and pose it to our panelists, make sure that we cover that question in the session. There's also a chat function. Please feel free to use that to introduce yourselves and share with us where you're dialing in from and where you're located. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists. There we go. So we have with us Siri Genig, who is the principal and founder of Bridge. We have Jacques Erasmus, who's the SVP for Integrated Services at Sibanye-Stillwater. And we have Victoria Stephen, who is the CEO of Bond Holdings. So our esteemed panel will be discussing the specifics of how to build agile supply chains in mining and some of the challenges that we've been facing in our industry over the last couple of months, really the beginning of the year. So I thought what I would do is maybe set the stage and share some of the knowledge that we've gained across different industries and specific to mining before I turn over to our panelists. So I just wanted to share some statistics that when I came across them were really something that was mind-boggling to me. The Institute for Supply Chain has done some research and has found that about 75% of American companies across different industries have been affected in their supply chains by COVID. 75%. I mean, that's just, to me, that's a number that is incredible and really highlights these times that we're in. And the other maybe surprising piece of that is that there's also been about 44%, so just under half of those companies that have been impacted, who didn't really have a plan in place to lead them through this. So they were really surprised and didn't really know how to manage the situation. And if we're looking at Canada, the numbers are quite similar. So we're looking at about 70% of companies who were impacted in their supply chains. And again, about half of them not being really prepared for that. So if we keep that in mind and look at some of the challenges we've faced, right, they've really hit us from all sides. We've seen the challenges in our supply chains with the impact of on transportation and logistics that has made it really difficult to get supplies in. And, you know, I think the famous example, I think that all of us will still be thinking about many years from now is toilet paper. Just we couldn't get enough toilet paper in grocery stores and they kept on running out because the supply just wasn't coming in. And at the same time, then we saw these shocks to the demand side where, you know, people were buying toilet paper much more than they usually would, and similar spikes in other items that we've seen. So all of that has then made it really hard for us to use our relied upon principles and systems in supply chain that, you know, relied a lot on planning and understanding some of these supply and demand impacts. It's just become much more uncertain and unpredictable in a way. And this approach that many of us use in terms of lean management of our supply chains and just in time really doesn't allow for much flexibility and buffers. And that has really meant that there's a lot of agility and resilience in our supply chains. So I think that explains some of these struggles that many companies have been facing. Now, if we're looking specifically to mining, of course, we can, you know, we know our supply chains are already difficult. Before COVID happened, there's so many of our mine sites that are located in very remote areas, in geographically difficult to reach areas. So they're already challenged in themselves often, and that hasn't really become any better. And we've seen the same impacts in our both demand and supply sides. We've seen some interesting changes in the demand side. You know, one of the indicators I would say is that commodity prices have fallen, other than gold, many of them in a 2-digit range in terms of percentage points. We've seen a lot of supply being taken off the market potentially, or at least being at risk. I found some numbers around 7 billion in total across the different commodities that are at risk at the moment, just because we had to shut many mines down. So, you know, all of that is creating this very bleak picture, admittedly. And we're here to talk a little bit more about how we can move forward and some of the things that our panelists have already found that work that will help us navigate this. So before I turn over to them, we thought it would be a good idea to get an idea from you guys, our participants, in terms of the challenges that you have faced in your organizations. So what I'm going to do is put up this Mentimeter survey. You will see at the top of the slide, it tells you a website, mentimeter.com, and a code, which you dial in once you get to the website. And you will then see the same question on this website. What are the top 3 supply chain challenges your organization has encountered in 2020? And by 2020, we really mean, you know, COVID, since COVID affected us all. And so I'm going to leave this up for a moment and wait for you guys to submit some of the challenges you've been facing. And we hopefully will be covering a lot of these throughout the session. So I'll wait a couple of moments to give you all a chance to do that. There we go, there's some more coming in. Product availability, delivery delays. So a lot of the things that you know, again, we've discussed it in our previous discussion with the panelists as well, a lot of impacts that are really affecting both sides of our supply chain. So I'll leave this up in the background. People will still be able to submit their vote, and maybe as it develops, I'll keep track of that. But I'll turn over now to our panelists. I do not want to take any more time before you guys get a chance to share your opinion. And wow, now we just got a whole bunch of things submitted here. So we'll keep an eye on this as we go through the session. So maybe I can start with Siri and just get Siri to maybe outline a little bit. First of all, introduce yourself in a little bit more detail, and maybe share with us your perspective on the supply chains challenges and just what we're seeing in supply chains in mining right now.
Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, everybody, and to all of the participants, thank you for joining, and to the panelists, I'm looking forward to this very much. So my name is Siri Genick. So if you have iPhones, you might want to turn them off so you don't say, "Hey Siri." And I run Bridge, which is a niche boutique consulting firm that specializes in strategic sustainability for projects in mining for the most part, as well as infrastructure. So ports, hydro, dams, as well as mining. And interestingly, they actually do meet in the middle, and particularly right now, and we'll talk a bit about that. And one of the areas that Bridge looks after is strategic supply chain, or strategic procurement. That is how I grew up in the world of mining, so to speak, and infrastructure. I am a lawyer. Originally, I still am, but not practicing. But risk management has always been my passion. And I've always believed that the core in mining of risk lies in supply chain. Unfortunately, COVID-19, the disruptor, as I like to call it, has rewritten this script. And I think there'll be a movie out someday very soon called Reinvented Tomorrow. What it means for the mining world that has sort of lived in its own space for a long time is that overnight it had to reconsider a number of paradigms that it had taken for granted, or perhaps been less aware of. And two of them come to the top. One we will not really address today, although it is important, and that's talent and the importance of talent. So if we're talking about that ESG framework that needs to be the strategic framework within which mining wants to move forward, as we know, employees, the importance, talent, and it's also S for supply chain. So literally overnight, supply chain was thrust into the forefront. Now, whether if you take the toilet paper of mining, or I found not being able to find flour to bake very hard as well, all of a sudden the mentality that I certainly have been functioning in, or had been functioning in the procurement space, was just in time. And all of a sudden, just in time is just too late. So the concept of quickly in the warehouse, quickly out, no maintenance, and just making sure everything was there, and maybe one or two spares, has totally gone out of the window. So what does that mean? It means that the whole organization now needs to understand the role that supply chain plays, and throughout the organization. So if you are missing that one single screw that actually brings to a halt, and you're in an operating space, your process plant, and that happened to used to come from China, and you only ever had one or maybe two, or even from Germany, and you always expected an expert to come and help you replace it if it broke down, that has gone away. And we've seen, certainly with my clients, that there is a lack of understanding of the full supply chain. So they understand they've got a process plant or a smelter, or they're running fleets of different kinds of equipment to operate their mines, but they don't really understand where that supply chain starts, what are the different pieces, and where it also goes. So it's downstream as well as upstream, and mining is literally stuck in the middle. The good news is, I think it highlights the role that mining plays in the socioeconomic ecosystem of a region. So if we go back to the ESG, that bigger pace. And so you have to zoom out. Who are all the players? who brings the maintenance, the oil, the screws, the different pieces. And you have to almost be able to reverse engineer every piece of your equipment. So that if you had to build it in situ, as opposed to look forward to different people helping you and supplying, and somebody you could just pick up the phone and say, can you deliver 20 more of these overnight? Well, no, you can't, because there's no more airplanes. So what happened? So a totally different understanding of your procurement space, your supply chain. Who are your contractors? Are they able to survive in a 90-day terms of payment? You've seen a lot of the majors and even the mid-tiers looking at who their contractors and suppliers were, and the smaller ones actually not only pay up front, but to make sure that they were okay and had 90-day worth of cash flow. Now, obviously you have to be larger to be able to do that, but just understanding who and where could fall apart and making sure they were protected, so ultimately you were protected, is a new way of addressing that risk management. So you're looking at a lot of agility. You're also looking at talent, and I'd like to touch on that. I see HR hiring versus the SERV benefit. I can't touch to. I can't really talk to. But now, when you're going to be looking at who are the right people for those teams in supply chain. It's going to be somebody who also understands the big picture, and not just the person who's perhaps working on just one contract or one supplier or one part of it. People will need to have to understand how the system works. What role does their part play in the ecosystem? That means also looking long term, which is a very new concept for the mining industry. You can't, because it's just in time doesn't work. And that means that even within the financing world, as we go through the mining's larger and broader supply chain of its stakeholders, as it's looking for cash to come in and cash flow, well, you can't, it's going to be challenging to report that next quarter. And we're going to see the next quarters come up very soon. June 30th is around the corner. And the results will be meaningless because they'll be pretty much the same as they were last quarter because of COVID. But now people are going, okay, so how do we go to tomorrow? What are your plans? How are you managing that risk? How are you agile? So an example I gave a client recently was, just because you're the captain of the Titanic, and I by no means mean that mining is a sinking industry. On the contrary, the captain of the ship needs to understand that he may not be able to build the life raft, but he needs to talk to the people within the crew to say, look, we need, and have that message. So the tone at the top, we're going to be okay. We need all of you to help us now take this huge ship apart and build life rafts to get us to shore. And that takes a different perspective than the perspective of obviously taking a major vessel across the ocean. And so you all of a sudden become more agile, you find alternatives, you work with everybody, all hands on deck. And everybody is part of that solution. That agility is core. Supply chain has not always been agile. The training that many of us have received has been, you know, whether you look at a lean approach or what have you, it's been, again, a very, very narrow and restricted approach that worked for a long time that no longer is applicable. You're also part of an ecosystem. So if you go to that S again within the ESG component and supply chain and COVID right now, is that who in your surroundings is able to help you build. So again, understanding all the different key components and how you can call on all of them, and understanding how you can help to get them up to speed, to make them part of your supply chain, but not just for now. So these are not Band-Aid solutions. It's for the long term, because trade won't come back overnight. We won't be working with China overnight, or anywhere else that has been, you know, whether it's Taiwan or Korea or areas where we just knew things would come from. And whether you agree or disagree with different trade policies currently going on, the reality is that they're not what they were 4 months ago. So how do we manage within that framework when even the border with the United States has become an issue? So my suggestion to my clients, and I'll give you one example that is not in mining but flows into it, is working with the Port of Montreal. The Port of Montreal and the big logistics team that they work with, which is called Cargo M, have been able through the pandemic to seamlessly and brilliantly, if I may say so, take up the challenge. And you've had the port work with the shipping companies, mostly from around Europe, artificial intelligence, the railways, CNCP, the airlines, Air Canada, the truckers, because the borders were shut with the US. So now how do you move things around within your own country, within your own provinces? Unions, stevedores, operators, really focus on working and helping our provinces and our country move together from east to west. And there were challenges. I'm not saying but it was about fixing and making it work. And I do want to highlight it because I think it's a brilliant example of who Canada and Quebec and Montreal are, but also of being innovative and creative. One thought to leave you with, because I think my time is running out: reverse engineer the solution. So understand your supply chain from the end all the way to the front and then back again. That is the only way you're going to be able to understand where your pain points are, how to find the solutions, bring everybody on board. And for the upstream part, you're going to start thinking of vertical integration as opposed to horizontal integration. So a very different way of doing, again, paradigm shift. Who are your off-takers? Who are the people that you can work with? And with whom you're going to partner. So a much more partnership role. And Victoria will get into this, but you don't always need all things all the time, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's equipment, and even if it's people. So maybe we can think of a way to be innovative and creative. And I don't want to preempt the great ideas that I love about Victoria's content about artificial intelligence and where we can think creatively to have some of the things maybe that we think we're short of, or help our colleagues who are in the same space. And while they might be somewhat of a competitor, for some pieces, they may just be somebody that can help be part of the solution. So that's pretty much all. I mean, I could go on for 3 hours. There's so much to talk about. Keep it simple, keep it agile, involve your whole teams, make them part of the solution, and reverse engineer. So thank you, Claudia.
All right, thank you, Siri. That was really interesting, and you know, I think you touched on so many things that hopefully we'll get a chance to discuss in a little bit more detail, from looking at you know, more strategic long-term view of supply chains to collaboration, reverse engineering, the understanding, flipping your mindset to people and data and technology. So thank you for your insights on this. So maybe we'll move to Jacques now, and we can hear from Jacques what he's been seeing in his organization and some of the things that they're doing to deal with the situation we're in right now.
Thanks, Claudia. Yeah, I think Siri has touched on a number of points, and I think to the audience, the important thing is it isn't business as usual. I think technology is definitely one of the things which will you use more and more. We've really gone and stepped back and said, how can we use technology, and also looking at our processes. We are of the opinion that you can do a lot of things, and I'll share some of the examples. But I think you have to be agile. What you also need to understand is that your supply chain actually has different components. You have to understand what you buy. And I'll explain that to when you're procuring products versus services, or you are looking internally to provide services to your various companies. I think what this COVID has done is it's reset what the world expects. I can tell you that if I told you 3 months ago that we haven't had one of our procurement people or any of our service staff in the office, people would have looked at me strange. In fact, we've been running for 3 months now without anybody being in the office. And we don't intend to go back to the office. We have a project called Soho, small office, and actually clean out the processes for us to be able to work remotely. Doesn't matter where you are. Similarly, if you then take that concept, you say you need to give flexibility. So what we've done is we've actually adjusted our procurement policies. So depending on what we buy now follows different procurement streams. We used to have a very rigid process, and everything we purchased had to go through that process. That no longer exists. It depends on what we buy and how quickly we need to get it here. Similarly, the supply chain teams have been asked to buy stuff which they've never bought before. So we have been buying PCR tests in China. And firstly, and I think Siri, you touched on it, is to understand what you are buying, where you can source it from, and then more importantly, how do you get it to your mine site? And that's really been challenging the teams. But what they've come up with is some innovative ideas to move stuff. And it's not always the shortest routes which get the stuff here. So if you're buying PCR kits, it has to be in cold chain, minus 18 degrees storage. You have to think about the insurance. To get it onto the plane, it can no longer, you can't necessarily, if it lands, there's stopovers in your flights, because you don't have direct flights. You need to take all of that. And the teams have really gotten very smart and innovative to do this. The other suggestion I would make is don't try and reinvent everything yourself. What we've been doing is talking to our peers and saying, what are you doing? What are you finding? And that collaboration has really helped people to find solutions to it. So you're not in this alone. Where companies usually, we keep it to ourselves, they've now been able to share information to say, talk to this guy, find this. It's like building a puzzle. Then obviously technology, I think, is the big key differentiator. And you need to use technology going forward. The day where you still send a paper invoice or talk to the mine overseer to get a contract, those days are gone. All of this will happen with technology, and there's various platforms, and I'll share a few of you. So we've internally said, and we saw some, call it administrative processes, like people, we have people preparing financial statements and so forth. What we've actually done inside is use the gig economy platforms, where we say you can have a more flexible hour, and then you can actually bid for additional work to get the work done. Or similarly, we can put those on platforms outside of our company, and people can actually bid for the work. So it's no longer a very rigid process to understand that work or to win that work. So it's different platforms we are using, especially on the services side. Then obviously, I think, Siri, you also touched on, you need to be close to your suppliers. I joined Sibanye about a year ago, and for 6 months, I sort of talked to our top suppliers. So I head up integrated services, but my supply chain VPs report to me. I can tell you in the last, since COVID started in March, we talk to our top suppliers on a weekly basis, and not to their buyers or their local manager. We talk to their CEOs, COOs, to understand where are they, what does their raw materials look like, what is their supply availability for us, and then more importantly, what's reserved for Sibanye, to understand what we need to do, and alternatively then go find option A, B, C, and D, if option A lets us down. Similarly, logistic was a problem. So when the lockdown happened in South Africa, we were lucky. We could still move our material freely because our vehicles were were allowed to do. We went and fetched stuff at their warehouse. Previously, they delivered it to our warehouse. We used our fleet of vehicles to actually go deliver stuff. And what we've done in a few cases, I've actually picked up stuff for some of my other mining companies and delivered it to their mining stuff. And it's helping each other out. So if they have a shortage, we talk to them, they help us out, and we help them out. And that's the collaboration which will come forward. And then the last point I want to touch on is really rethinking how you look at supply chain. We're of the view that supply chain will look significantly different to what it looked before COVID. What is important here is to really think out of the box. Now's the time where people are also easy to change. So we are thinking out of the box on what supply chain should look like. And we are working with various consulting companies to really make that a reality. Some of it's already there. And the big thing there is AI prediction. So we're working very hard to predict not just what we need to buy, but also how that affects our cash flows, production, working costs, because all of those you need to look at the holistic picture to make a sensible discussion. And we're giving the guy who's actually making the purchase order that information to make the best economic decision for the mine, because I can't stop it at supply chain. If an engineer orders something on a shaft, by the time it gets to me, that transaction is gone. But if we can give him good information and we can track that real time, then obviously we've made progress. So Claudia, that's sort of my opening remarks.
Great, thank you so much, Jack. Again, I mean, I think so much overlap between what you and Siri were saying around collaboration and what you also added around some of the changes that you've seen in terms of how decision-making works and has to shift in its structures and different work being assigned differently and just new things popping up that you previously didn't have to deal with. And then, lastly, also looking at the future, which I think is one thing that we might have traditionally not been very good at in our industry. And this situation has really forced us to do that a little bit more. So thank you for those insights. So I'll turn over to Victoria now. Just before I do that, just a reminder for our participants, if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them under the Q&A section, and you will find it at the bottom of your screen. If you see a question that mirrors what you were going to ask us, just vote up that question. It will move up in the question lineup, and that way we can make sure that the most dominant, most relevant questions do get answered in the session. So Victoria, why don't you add to what you've already heard and share with us your perspective?
Thanks, Claudia. Good day, everyone. It's nice to share the space with you. So my 18 years of experience in the mining industry has been focused on servicing the mining operators and the suppliers on the media side of the in South Africa. So this experience has built passion for mining, obviously, and it gave rise to my startup business, Born Holdings, and the project Infuse, which is currently in the process of going to market. So we're a global business platform with fresh and innovative technology solutions tailor-made to create more agile and cost-effective mining value chains. So this is a really exciting time when it comes to technology. It gives us the opportunity to explore the universe and at the same time, every atom of our complex bodies. So imagine the technology advances we can achieve in industries if we connect and share our wealth of information. In these challenging times, we are beginning to understand that through technology, we can overcome the disconnect between us. Because of the distancing measures in place for COVID, and continue to conduct business across the globe successfully, regardless of the current circumstances. So if technology can connect us in this way, then there's an opportunity to connect operators to the different levels of the supply chain network. So this is where I really get passionate and excited because mining is in my bones, as my father would have said. So the cost of mining is increasing on many levels, and supply chain agility is an area that I believe carries huge potential in cost saving and business growth. The supply chain network is evolving from a linear nature to a more dynamic, interconnected ecosystem. However, data tends to be siloed in separate information clusters. So this leads to missed opportunities as organizations can't see where these areas intersect and align, which increases the cost of operations on both sides of the buy-supply relationship. So through technology, we are offered the opportunity to prevent the margin erosion we're currently seeing. So when you look at the potential of technology and AI, it gives us the ability to react in milliseconds rather than days to things and make decisions in a proactive way, which will improve operational efficiencies and reduce costs. On this principle, our technology Infuse was born. So we're a strategic cloud-based technology solution, and the benefit of that is we actually forge a connected community of mining operators, suppliers, and partners. So by connecting the mining buyers to the different levels of supply chain from various locations, it creates a secure one-stop virtual warehouse marketplace where users can effortlessly buy and sell different levels of space. This creates an always-on, no out-of-stock environment, which I think is key in the circumstances that we're faced with. So the technology solution promotes deep, balanced collaboration and provides instant transparency across multiple areas of the value chain at once. You know, in these challenging times, suppliers need to be able to change gears quickly and adapt to a shifting market. So accurately communicating the material needs of buyers to suppliers and the correct supply options to buyers is critical to this. It gives the buyers a proactive it gives them proactive decision making. So I think what's also important is technology provides the opportunity for smaller and more medium-sized suppliers in tier 2 and 3, the opportunity to bid for business and offer a service-centric angle to the supply of materials. So through this marketplace, emerging suppliers can also help buyers improve their supply chain spend. And of course, there's also the personal touch advantage that comes with more agile suppliers. So I think what's important is we understand that the industry is connected at different levels across the supply chain. And we're a flexible technology solution, so we can bridge the gap of connectivity by integrating at sort of any tier level within the supply chain. And I think that's really critical from a technology perspective, is to understand the environment that we're working in. And then obviously as an added value, we can provide data analytics as a result of the circular flow and consolidation of the data information between the mining buyers and suppliers. We'll be able to provide forecasted customer buying trends to suppliers across all tiers of the supply chain, I think, which has a massive ripple effect across, all the way down to the manufacturing level. So when suppliers understand the buying trends of their customers, it creates an agile supply chain. You know, and this is something that we intend to expand the connectivity and the visibility to mining regions in Africa, you know, to promote cost savings and business growth for local suppliers. So with support from government and authorities in the different mining regions, you know, we'll create an environment where suppliers from all global regions can service the mining buyers in Africa by using our platform to actually collaborate with local suppliers in each region. And we've had initial discussions with governments and authorities in abundant mining regions in Africa already. And the response was, and I quote, "When can we get started?" So, you know, this kind of enthusiasm for collaboration will encourage investment into Africa and create a win-win business scenario for all, and also an interdependent ecosystem between the global markets and mining regions in Africa. You know, so I think the takeaway here for me would be the enthusiasm for collaboration across the mining value chain will create the agility, or create agility in rapid changing times. And you know, it will create a win-win environment, business environment for all.
Great, thank you so much, Victoria. It's really, really interesting to hear a little bit also from the other side, right? We've heard Jacques and Ziri speak a little bit more about the perspective from mining companies side, and you've added a great understanding of more the perspective of suppliers, and also how we can, integrate more of them into our network. So that was really, really interesting. Thank you so much. We are getting questions, so instead of me asking any more questions, I'm going to jump right into the questions that have been submitted by our participants, and hopefully we'll get through as many as possible. So this one is, you know what, I'm going to go through the ones that are general for the panel first, and then there are some that are specific to some of our panelists. We'll go through them after. They should be a little bit quicker, I think. So the first one that is to the entire panel is from Andy Reynolds, and he's asking, when the pandemic is about 5 years behind us, will procurement professionals still be thinking about resilience, or will efficiency and savings be once again the major driver? Excellent question, I think. Who would like to tackle that one? Jacques, why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Sorry, you were muted, so Jacques, go ahead.
I'm happy to tackle that one. I think it will always be the combination of those three. Mine's obviously try and always be in the lowest quartile, and the only way we can do that is by obviously looking at cost savings. But cost savings alone will only bring you an incremental saving of 3 to 5%, and that's been proven over time. So that is not really, so you have to think differently in how you reach the market. And maybe I can address some of the other questions as well, where people ask, do we think about tier 2 and below? Definitely. And where we see that is where you actually use technologies like Victoria's, if you use Hello Chain and so forth. So you actually go and connect with communities. All the guy actually needs is a cell phone. He no longer needs actually a back office to place an order with you. So we actually think that the small companies who embrace technology would actually be the winners, because large companies will still have their set processes, which obviously technology will assist. But the small guy really actually has an opportunity to make a big impact, because he actually does not need a big buying department or even a relationship. All he needs is a smartphone, and he'll be able on these platforms, which we think is the new way going forward, using sort of Hello Chain technology and even some blockchain to actually do business going forward.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That's really insightful. Ziri, what do you think about?
I totally agree with Jacques. I mean, it's just on that, and it just does bring the whole panel together. Is that as we move forward, I mean, 5 years will be just the tipping point of the end of the recession. So COVID will ease out at some point. Hopefully we'll get the vaccine, but you have to get a global economy up again. And it'll take a long time, but it also gives us an opportunity to look at how to do things differently. And this is certainly for the mining, the opportunity to rethink the model, the traditional model. So like I said, all the lean systems and the lean belts and all that, if you look at it just doesn't make any sense. We're moving to smart mines. So whether you're doing vertical integrations or whether you're using platforms, you will need maybe a big smartphone or an iPad or a tablet, but you will be able to run mines on a small piece of equipment. And before it even gets to a human being, somebody's going to say, in the smelter, for whatever, something's gone wrong and we need to get it. So it'll automatically get to Victoria's system through the system that Sibanye perhaps has set up. And before a human being even knows it, that piece of something will be on its way from somewhere close by, actually.